Hello, my name is Jasmine Singer. I am 29 years old. Today is August 22nd, 2009. We are in downtown Manhattan at the Storycorps location, and I will be interviewing my grandma.
And I am Sherrey Glickman, and I'm in the same place as Jasmine, and I am 85 years old, and I'm going to be interviewed.
And I'm very excited about that. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I think that you have a really inspiring story, and I hope that everyone can hear it. Um, I have learned so much for you over the past nearly 30 years, and everyone in our family has too, and everyone who you've touched in their life has been moved beyond words by you. I know that you were a teacher for many, many years, and you still run into your students who say what an impact you've had on their life. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today. So why don't we start with your childhood? Where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, in Brownsville,
Hmm.
and I had a wonderful childhood. We were very poor, but I didn't know it. Nobody knew it. Everybody was poor. But I had a wonderful family, and I had a lot of friends, and I was very good in school. They pushed me ahead because in those days they didn't know how to treat individuals, so they put you one grade ahead, and when you caught up there, they put you again ahead. My family life was wonderful. I had two brothers and a sister. I shared a bedroom with two brothers. I didn't even know them until we all grew up and got married, and then we were very close.
So what do you mean you didn't know them because there was a big age difference?
There was 5 years between both brothers, and my sister was the oldest. My sister was 13 years younger than her youngest brother.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what were your siblings' names?
Well, Charlotte was the oldest. I thought of her as a second mother. She used to buy me dolls. Ed was next, and Ed was the rebel in the family. And then I came, and then Milt, who I didn't know until he grew up. But he was a very kind young man,
And
always was.
Uncle Milt is still alive, of course, and
Yes,
and you still have a very close relationship with him.
I just saw him last week.
How's he doing?
Fine,
Good. And he's living where?
in Florida.
Very good. Um, Going back to what you were talking about with your childhood, uh, what do you mean that Uncle Ed was rebellious? What did he do that was so rebellious?
He had to do his own thing. He was not um, like anybody else. He wanted to be different, and he was. He got into a lot of trouble, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were the goody two shoes.
Pretty much, yes. I guess my parents thought of me as the good child
Yeah.
because I used to do what was expected of me. And then they were very proud of me because I was well ahead in every subject area.
What was your favorite subject?
Um, Actually, English.
Mm-hmm.
And even though my family spoke Yiddish, I never did. But I learned it.
You've taught me some Yiddish too,
Yes, I did.
namely the curse words.
Yes, I did.
Like geh kachen auf dem Yam
Right.
Du bist der Machshefa.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, I know you're very proud of me when I curse you out in Yiddish.
Right.
You really are like nobody else. You know that. Um, so going back to your house when you were growing up, you said you were very poor and you had to share a room with all of your siblings. And I remember you've told me that you had to sleep on two chairs pushed together. Is that right?
Well, that occurred before Milt was born. We had a fire in our house, and I was quite young. And before my parents could buy me a bed, they put two chairs together, and that's where I slept until they bought a bed for me.
Mm.
But I was comfortable, and I never thought to complain.
Mm. What were your parents' names?
My mother was Pauline, my father was Abraham.
And where did they come from?
Both of them came from Romania.
And so they immigrated here,
Yes,
and they came through Ellis Island.
yes. And I have their names in Ellis Island. And my son has a middle name, Ellis.
Oh, that's nice. So it lives on. Um, Regarding when they came here, what did they do for a living?
They were both very young. My mother wasn't even 17. She worked in the garment industry. My father worked in the shoe manufacturing.
Hmm. I think that mom has told me that he was always trying to fix her shoes when she was growing up.
And he always examined everybody's shoes to see if they were good.
That's very funny.
Yes,
Um, so when you were growing up in Brooklyn, what was life like? You were born in 1924, is that right?
yes.
So you were a kid during the Great Depression. Do you remember it?
I don't remember it as a Great Depression. Everybody was poor.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we always had what to eat. And I never had a new dress until I was 16.
Mm.
I always had hand-me-downs. And I didn't know that one bought new dresses.
Well, it's ironic, isn't it? Since all I wear is hand-me-downs.
Well, you're carrying on the
That's
tradition.
right. So what did you eat? What was like a common meal for you?
You know, in those days, you went home for lunch from school.
Mm.
I had a Ward's cake and a glass of milk for lunch.
Wow. Wow. And weren't you very thin?
I was. As a matter of fact, I was not too healthy. And so the school system sent me away several years to a camp where they were going to make me healthy. While I was there, the teacher, who had many grades, taught me how to teach subtraction. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I taught the other kids subtraction. I think that was the beginning of my desire to be a teacher.
Yeah. And I want to just go back in time a little bit more. When you were a kid, didn't you used to perform at nightclubs?
That was my sister's doing. I had a lot of curls like Shirley Temple, and I was little. I looked younger than I was, and I also had a decent voice. And so she got me involved in singing in nightclubs. And I sang, "Oh, You Nasty Man."
Sing it,
And I
Grandma. Sing, "Oh, you nasty man."
Oh, you nasty man, taking your love on the easy plan, here and there and everywhere. Oh, you big bad man.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Now, just think about how many years ago that was that I still remember the
I think
words.
that would be illegal now for a little girl to go into a nightclub and sit on men's laps and sing that.
Right, right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's quite a story. Did you make money from doing that?
No,
No.
maybe my sister did.
So you were just exploited by your
I
sister,
was
basically.
exploited,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Which was also probably the beginning of your interest in speaking up for the underdog. What was it like, Grandma, to be Jewish in the early part of this century in Brooklyn?
Well, since most people nearby were also Jewish, I just assumed that was natural. And all my family lived close by, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and we played in the street because nobody had an apartment large enough to play. And so we were innovative. We played games in the street.
Like what?
Patsy, kick the can, Johnny on the pony, a tag, iron tag.
Iron tag. What's
Eh,
the difference between tag and iron
You
tag?
had to touch something iron, and therefore you couldn't be caught if you were touching iron.
Wow. That's very creative. Nowadays, kids don't even leave their couch.
I know.
So, even though I know we could spend hours talking about your childhood, I want to just move on a little bit. When you were 16, you graduated from high school,
I did.
and then what happened?
I went on to college.
Wow.
And in my family, If you if you've got married, you didn't get educated. So I'm the only one in my generation, and maybe the next generation, who got a college degree.
And where did you go to college?
I went to Brooklyn College, and years later, I went to Rutgers, and
So
I
you're
got a master's degree,
so you went to Brooklyn College when you were just 16 and you studied what?
psychology.
Hmm. Um, and
Well,
that might actually have to do with why you understand me so well. Just kidding.
uh, I was also a cheerleader at Brooklyn College, and I still have my major B.
Oh yeah?
I do.
Do you
I
still
kept that.
cheerlead at night? Where you get your pom poms and walk
Oh,
around?
sure.
Yeah,
Every night.
thought so. That's what you and your friends do when you say you're playing bridge. You're just cheerleading.
Right, exactly.
So, Grandma, when you were 18, or maybe 17,
Right.
who did you meet?
When I was 17, the cheerleading squad were all invited um, to a going away party for a guy who was going into service. And that night, I met a guy named George Ream. And if you really believe in um, knowing who was your life's companion, that's what happened that night. That night.
You were wearing rubber bands as to hold your socks up.
Stockings up,
Yeah.
yes. We did not have uh, pantyhose.
Hmm.
And on the way home from that party, the radio played a song that remained in my life forever. It was Embraceable You. And
I know it's hard for you to talk about that song.
I always feel like when I hear it, I'm being uh, communicated with.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's true too. Um, so weren't you on a date with someone else when you met Grandpa George?
Yes, I was supposed to be with a dentist.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
We'd all be orthodontists today. So you met Grandpa George and then what happened?
That was it. He went into service. He was 5 years older than I, therefore, I felt a little intimidated
Oh, you nasty man.
because he was so much ahead of me in terms of life. Um, he was so vivacious and so charming. It was very hard not to fall in love with him. But very shortly thereafter, we got into war. And so we got married 9 months after we met.
9 months,
I
really?
know, I know, that's coincidence, but it was 5 years later that I had my first child.
And when you had your first child, which is Uncle Bruce, of course, you were teaching by then, is that right?
Yes,
And where were you living when Uncle Bruce was born?
on Lincoln Place in Brooklyn.
Was that in Coney Island?
No,
No, not yet.
no, we moved there very shortly thereafter.
And Mom was born in Coney Island.
Yes,
Mom was born in 1950
yes.
and is 3 years younger than Bruce. Yeah, okay. And so at this point, you were teaching in a nursery school or
No,
first?
no. When your mother was 2 years old, I started to teach in a nursery school because I couldn't tolerate the conversation of women standing outside and rocking carriages. I needed more than that. So I went to work part time
Hmm.
and I took your mother with me. And then it became full time. And the reason I could do it was I lived in the same house as my mother. And so she was always there if one of the children got sick. But my mother used to feed Bruce first because he was the boy, and therefore you treated him differently.
Oy vey.
Oy vey, right.
Boy, have times changed, huh?
Uh, Times have
Yeah,
changed, yes.
in many ways. So, This house that you were living in now in Coney Island your whole family lived on that block.
Yes,
Yeah. Wow, that must be something else.
that was fun.
Yeah, I bet. And Grandpa George was doing what at this time?
He was a social worker.
Okay, so he was done with his service, obviously. And
Right.
what was your life like with Grandpa George?
Uh, we just kept going ahead. We became richer. Not that we ever were rich, but we were comfortable. And so we moved to a larger apartment, and then we moved to New Jersey. But when I had a 2-year-old little girl, I taught her a stupid song because it was not meant for a 2-year-old. I taught her Old Man River that Paul Robeson used to sing in
Can you
the
sing a little bit of it, Grandma?
Old Man River, that old man river, he don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling. He keeps on rolling along.
uh, I have this image of my mother as a little toddler singing that
She
song.
was adorable.
That must have been pretty funny.
It was.
So you moved to New Jersey, to Metuchen,
Right.
and you got a job teaching there.
Yes, I started another nursery school program at the temple, and I did that for about 6 years. Then I decided it was time to go on to the public school system because I wanted to make sure that when I was older, I would have a pension. And so I went to work in East Brunswick, and I was there for 26 years.
Wow, I remember that. Actually, I remember going to when you were teaching in East Brunswick when I was a little girl, going and watching you teach. So I remember that quite well. And at some point in there, as you said, you got your master's degree. And your life with Grandpa George, from what I hear, was very musical and full of dancing and theatrics.
Music was part of my life forever. Every song had meaning to me. Um, when I was young, I used to go to my father's store and watch his store while he went home for dinner, and I'd listen to the hit parade. I could sing every one of those songs today. I have not forgotten the lyrics of any of them. And certain songs had meaning in my life. Every song had meaning in my life.
Mm.
When I was 12 years old, I started to go to the theater. In those days, the subway was the place everybody went. And so I used to, at age 12, go to New York City and see shows. And I paid, I think at first, 75 cents, but I sat in the last row. Then it went up to $1.25. That was the last row, but I loved it. I loved it.
I think it's important to mention, too, that you were and still are, of course, absolutely drop dead gorgeous with this flaming auburn hair and these beautiful outfits. And I've heard stories from Mom that she would come downstairs in the middle of the night and you and Grandpa George would just be dancing around the living room.
Yes,
Yeah, that must have been quite a romance.
it was.
And uh, of course, this is completely devastatingly sad to say, but what happened to Grandpa George when he was in his 50s?
He died young,
He died when he was.
57. I was 52. And he died quickly.
What?
He had cancer of the
Pancreas?
that's it,
Yeah.
pancreas. So he died very quickly.
Yeah.
And it was devastating. But my children were there for me, and that helped. And then about a year later, I wasn't looking, but I was found by another great man, my lovely Murray Glickman, who was so kind and so wonderful. I couldn't ignore him. And he was kind to my family. And so I married him.
And he became who I knew as Grandpa.
Right.
And
All
he,
my grandchildren were born, except Jeremy had been born. He was about a year and a half old. But my granddaughters all were born while he was the grandpa.
so Jeremy is my brother, and he was born in 1975. And then I was the next one to come in 1979, and Grandpa George died in 1976. Is that right? Yeah. And I know that had mom and my father and mother got divorced when I was like one or two. So, and that we came to live with you at that time, and Grandpa. And strangely, I do remember that house well in East Brunswick.
I want you to know that you came to live with us because of Grandpa. He felt that that the family should not be living alone. And so we bought this large house so everybody could have their own bedroom. And you didn't stay with us very long.
Well, you were, yeah, because mom got remarried at that
Right.
time. You were a gigantic part of our life growing up. And when my cousins, Aviva and Jordana, were born, you were just a huge part of their life too, all of our lives. I remember when I was sick in school, you would come pick me up. Just everything. You were in so many ways like my second mother. So I mean, I remember you've taught me all of this music, and that's something that we've shared is music throughout the years.
Would you like to hear some of the other songs that had meaning in my life?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
The song I associate with Grandpa Murray is You light up my life, you give me hope to carry on.
That was your song with Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, there was another song that had meaning too. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. But along came Down in the Meadow in the Itty Bitty Pool. That's what I taught my children in school, my grandchildren. And
That's funny. It's like down in the meadow in the itty bitty pool. That's what I taught my children in the school.
right, right. And then I was always involved with entertainment field. And one of the things that really affected me was Bette Midler singing to Johnny Carson, Set 'em up, Joe. We have,
Yeah.
you sing it.
The 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. So set 'em up, Joe. I got a little story I think you should
That
know.
really got to me. I think,
1992, May 1992. I know this because I'm the biggest Bette Midler fan on the face of this
right,
planet.
right. Um, and then I love you, a
A bushel
bushel and
and
a
a
peck.
peck, a bushel and a peck,
But
and a
you
hug
see,
around.
not just those songs. Those songs bring back certain memories.
Hmm.
But music has always been part of my life, even now.
Even now, if you can't even have a conversation with you without you singing about 30 or 40 songs.
Right, right. Everything to me is a song cue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, so just going back for a minute to, I guess, the 80s. You were still teaching in East Brunswick. I was a kid, and I was going to your school to when you were teaching, and everyone just loved you. And Grandpa was a pharmacist.
Yes.
Yeah, and how was your relationship with Grandpa?
It was wonderful. We were different. I mean, the relationship was different because we had married. We were adults, whereas first time we were kids. And so the relationship was a different kind, but very wonderful. He was a sweet, wonderful man. And at the end of his life, he went to work for a prison as a pharmacist. And he would call all the inmates his boys. And he would buy them toothbrushes and toothpaste and teach them how to brush their teeth. He was a wonderful guy. He was so good. But he had a difficult ending. Took him 2 years. He was not himself. That was a sad time.
Yeah, I remember that well. Grandpa died almost 10 years ago, exactly. It was around my 20th birthday.
Right, right.
That was a very hard loss.
It was.
Um, and after Grandpa died, you had been living in Florida and you moved back to New Jersey.
I wanted to be near my family.
Tell me about your relationship with your family.
Well, I have an outstanding relationship with everybody in the family. My son, my daughter, my grandchildren, my brother. Actually, it was my two brothers. Every now and then I think about Ed, who passed away 3 years ago. And I think to myself, I haven't spoken to him recently. But I never got to his funeral because my grandson was getting married the same time, and I had to go to Kansas where the wedding was. And so I never did see Ed finally go. But life is full of ups and downs, and you learn from everything. And if you're a smart person, you see the ups rather than the downs. You look at life as being wonderful, no matter what. You deal with the crises.
What happened to your sister?
Oh, my sister died of cancer.
When?
She was 57 also, and she left three daughters and a husband, and it was very painful. She was too young to go, and I was with her. Um, that was a very unhappy experience. I'd rather not go through it.
That's understandable. You've had so much loss in your life, and you have the best disposition of anyone I know. How do you do that?
I told you, you say you're lucky. You had these people in your life. They were wonderful. You're a better person for it. You're left with many happy memories. And my life, essentially, instead of saying I've lost so many people, I say I've had so many people. And I think of life as being good. I have a lot of friends, always did. And I'm very involved right now. I play a lot of bridge. I go to shows. I go to Atlantic City. I, I, I'm involved with my grandchildren. I'm involved with my family. And so things are good.
Grandma, what did teaching mean to you?
Oh, I love to teach. It was the right thing for me. I got such pleasure when a child came out with knowledge and the excitement of being able to look at a page and be able to read it, the joy I saw in the faces of these children. And then, I also taught learning disabled kids for a long time, and that was very pleasurable too.
Yeah.
I met some of them when they were grown up. They were good citizens. They found a place in society. These were not um, children who didn't have ability, but they didn't know how to put it to work.
Yeah. And you were given some awards when you were a teacher too, huh?
Yes, from the state, from the school, from my children.
Wasn't there a president who you met by way of your teaching?
Oh, that was way. I was 19, and the president was Harry Truman, and they wanted to show a young soldier's wife. It was really done because it was good
Publicity.
publicity.
They're still doing things that way.
I know. But anyway, I went to the White House, and the newspapers were there, and they took pictures of me. I was all of 19. I was a pretty girl and I was doing work for the war effort in terms of letting mothers go to work,
Hmm.
and I watched their children, and it was it was funny.
Grandma, there's been some other people who you've met along the way who've been quite famous. Um, Arlo Guthrie?
He lived near me. He lived. His father and mother lived 2 houses away, and they were different kinds of people. They walked around barefoot in the streets, and Arlo Woody wore
Oh,
his
it was
hair.
Woody, not Arlo.
Arlo
Oh,
was
it was
the
Arlo.
kid,
Oh, Arlo was the kid. Okay.
and Woody Guthrie used to wear jeans before they were popular. He wore his hair long. He had a beautiful wife who wore a, a tank top, even though she was pregnant in her ninth month.
And when you used to go bike riding in Brooklyn, who did you pass by?
Marilyn Monroe. And after a while, we got to at least say hello to each other. And she would wear dark glasses and a kerchief, but I know who she was. And after a while, we would wave to each other because we passed each other every day. And she was a lovely person. I was very sad when she died.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there have been some quite amazing people who we've lost, and this world, as I mentioned, is a much different place in a lot of ways than it was then. Um, how do you see the world today?
it's much more complicated, much more difficult. Um, we really have become one world. Wendell Willkie, many years ago, said that we would become one world. But when I was a child, we were not one world. We didn't even know about other countries, they weren't important. But now we affect everybody, and everybody affects us. I would hope that things get better, but I don't see it as a positive thing. I see the world right now as kind of difficult.
Yeah, I know that you and I have had long discussions about this because I see it so similarly to you, and it's very sad. I think that all we can do is the best we can do in our
Exactly.
lifetime, and as you have done. I mean, in so many ways, you were ahead of the game. And we were on the phone last night, and you told me that you often feel very different than other people because they see things at the surface, and you
Right,
see things below the surface.
right. And that's difficult. It's much easier to be like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I just know that you were really and are really a feminist, and in so many ways an activist,
Right, right.
just challenging the status quo.
Well, even my cousins used to say, "Why are you working? You're married. And why do you go to school? Why do you learn? You don't have to." And that attitude, I think, has changed. Women now,
Yeah, I think it had changed when mom was growing up and even when I was growing up, but now I see a lot of ways it's going backwards.
it really,
A lot of women who are opting for the stay-at-home mom life and just to be like second fiddle to their husbands. And um, I mean, obviously, I see that also with the way animals are treated today, which is much incredibly more egregiously cruel than ever before.
well, that's really too bad because I really think that every person has to think of herself as an individual and not depend upon another person because life does not allow that.
Which is something that you tell me all the time. I mean,
Right.
I actually tend toward being more of a dependent person sometimes. And I think of you and how did you get through losing two loves?
Exactly. But I did.
It's just your tenaciousness and your vivacity and your awesomeness, and it's just such, as I said when we began this interview, it's such an inspiration to me, and it really does give me a sense of hope. I I think that you have that effect on many, many people, and I think you know how fabulous you are.
Well, I know that I'm loved, and that's very important.
Yeah, you're very much loved, Grandma, and I'm just honored to have you as my grandma.
Thank you. and I'm honored to have you as my granddaughter and my whole family. I love everybody.
We love you too. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you for listening.